Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Make Money with Mace podcast. Took a bit of a hiatus because I got, stung by a bee, allergies. So, rested up when I could. So, podcast was on hold, but now that I'm feeling better, gonna start my NFL previews as the calendar turns to August. And I love football, love the NFL, played football in high school, had a fun time. And nothing's more fun to watch. I know more about football than I probably do any other sport. And hopefully that turns into some bet wins. So, I'm going to start off with the AFC West because that's where the reigning Super Bowl champs reside. And I'm going to take a look at the division and mention anything key that they did in the offseason and just generally talk about how I think they're going to do heading into the 2023 season. And I'm going to start with the last place team, the Denver Broncos. So the Denver Broncos heading into 2022 were a not so dark horse pick to finally win the division, take out the Kansas City Chiefs, finally make the playoffs again because they traded for Russell Wilson. And I was skeptical at the time of their ability to win the division. I thought they could contend for a wild card spot, and I think that's where most rational people landed. However, the reason why is because I thought Kansas City would be too good, and I thought Russell Wilson was declining a little bit, but not to the extent that he actually ended up showing. So getting into that, they were 5-12 last year, not good. They were 7-10 against the spread, which is a testament to their defense. So good on that part. They did lose their defensive coordinator, and they're replacing with Vance Joseph, and I'll get more into that later. But heading into it, they were the worst scoring offense in the NFL, and by DVOA, they were 29th, and DVOA is just a general efficiency monitor, and 29th isn't much better than 32nd. It's not like they had a crazy difference in efficiency versus scoring, because scoring is part of efficiency. Scoring defense, they finished 15th. DVOA, they were 10th. As everyone sort of knows, their defense was excellent early in the season, but injuries and poor offensive play caught up to them. And then special teams, scoring-wise, they were 5th. And that's mostly just, field goals, not allowing touchdowns. But in terms of actual return game, they were really poor. They were 29th in terms of their special teams efficiency, which accounts for kick returns and how much they got on the average kick return versus how much they allowed on the average kick return. Same goes for punts. So not good on that front either. And they added, this is what's really important, they added Mike McGlinchey, the tackle. They signed him away from the 49ers. They added Ben Powers, who's been a guard for the Ravens for a number of years. They also added Zach Allen. He's an interior defensive lineman from the Cardinals. They got Marquez Callaway from the Saints, which that's just a Sean Payton signing. And they added Samaje Perine as a change of pace back, who should be able to take the load off of Javonte Williams coming off a pretty bad injury. They ended up losing, I think this is important, they ended up losing some interior defensive linemen to the Panthers and Seahawks, Deshaun Williams and Draymond Jones, which you don't love just because you like having depth up front and having a solid rotation. But overall, I think gaining two good linemen, McGlinchey and Powers are definitely good, makes up for that. And in the draft, they added a couple players I like. Namely, they added Marvin Mims Jr. from Oklahoma. Oklahoma receivers have proven to be pretty solid. J.L. Skinner, I think, could be a steal from Boise State in the 6th round. Just he was undersized, played in Boise State, but he's toolsy. And in the UDFA market, I would take a look out for Jaleel McLaughlin from Youngstown State. Undrafted running backs do really well in the NFL, just because, again, running backs aren't valued very highly, and gaining a running back through the UDFA market who can hopefully provide care. To look into why he ended up going undrafted, but I do remember him playing well in spurts for Penn State. So who knows why that ended up happening, but I do think he could be a good ball player and help out on that interior defensive line. And Denver's going to need UDFA help more than anybody because they have no draft capital. And the reason for no draft capital is because of the trade for Russell Wilson. Now, Russell Wilson ended up, I'm looking in, before I get into the odds, right, I want to talk about why Russell Wilson was so bad and what they... He was 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a 5th-round pick, along with Noah Fant and Shelby Harris to Seattle. And then they immediately extended Russell Wilson to a 5-year, $242 million deal with $161 million of it guaranteed. That's a disaster. Not good. Like, not tenable, not a survivable situation to have that much cap space allocated to an aging quarterback who relied on their athleticism to make up for their deficiencies in their game. And go back to 2021, because that was the last full season he played. Russ had a 103 passer rating with a 64.8 completion percentage, 3,113 yards, and 25 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. That was really good. And I think he missed 5 or 6 games in that span. And last year, he had an 84.4 passer rating, 60.5 completion percentage, 3,524 yards, and 6 to 11 interceptions. That was in 15 games. He was sacked more than he's ever been sacked. Yeah, lowest completion percentage, fewest amount of touchdowns, lowest touchdown percentage, highest interception percentage, lowest yards per attempt, most sacks taken, highest sack percentage, and most sack yards lost. Just a terrible year, and not all of it can be blamed on Denver's offensive line. And honestly, the offensive line and other aspects of football teams have been blamed for Russell Wilson's deficiencies. He runs himself into sacks quite a bit. That's part of his escape artistry, and sometimes he gets caught. And there's stuff that offensive linemen just aren't responsible for when you have a quarterback that scrambles like that. And when he's lost a step athletically, it's going to be a cliff like what we saw. He never throws over the middle, ever. Like, lowest frequency in all of NFL. And that sort of deficiency is a disaster for a quarterback who is aging, because they need to be able to sit in the pocket, read a defense, make a quick strike over the middle. Instead, Russ likes to spin out of trouble, find TJ Lockett deep, right? That's been the play for the past decade, it felt like. If it wasn't TJ Lockett, it was Doug Baldwin before. And they ran the ball a ton to set up big play action plays that could weaponize the deep ball, which Russ was so good at earlier in his career. And that's really why I think that, like, Sean Payton can't fix him. A lot of the national media thinks that Sean Payton is just going to fix everything just because he had another short quarterback with Drew Brees. Drew Brees threw over the middle all the time and checked it down all the time and read a defense with the best of them. He's just a better QB than Russ ever was, and Sean Payton got the most out of him because Drew Brees, like the first point guard quarterback, where 5 out wide, find the mismatch, hit the mismatch in rhythm, and it was awesome. Payton constructed an offense with a quarterback who could operate in it. In this case, unless Payton takes the Seattle playbook, where it was Pete Carroll running the ball a ton just to run the ball, and the whole let Russ cook crowd begging for Russ to throw more because he was efficient on the limited throws that the Seattle offense gave him. Like, we saw what happens when Russ cooks. It's not good. He gets roasted by Patrick Starr during a Nickelodeon game. And that's the thing that, like, obviously there's that whole meme nature to him. Like, it is an improvement, and special teams will be better with Peyton across the board. And not only that, I think just on the margins across the board, they'll probably get penalized fewer times. They'll be better in situational football with Sean Payton in charge. I have zero faith in Vance Joseph to run a tight ship defensively because he didn't in Arizona. And Arizona has defensive talent. They had defensive talent his whole tenure. He just couldn't do anything with it. Another thing, too, is just I wrote before Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler went down. The weapon situation is Jerry Jeudy, Albert O, and Greg Dulcich. Cortland Sutton, maybe, if he can stay healthy. But the weapon situation is pretty dire. I don't know if I don't think the defense can continue its play at a high level based on how many snaps they took last year. That is a factor. Defense's performance year over year is highly dictated by the amount of snaps they take the year before. So defense that was on the field a ton ends up performing much worse than next year. And they already experienced that regression late in the season last year, where I think they got the Nickelodeon game where they lost 52-17 to the Rams. I think that it started last year, and there's no reason to think that they will get better. Just get better next year with a worse defensive coordinator, and just all those miles on them because they played with such a terrible offense that kept them on the field constantly. And like I said, I had those feelings before Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler went down. That's your number 3 and number 4 receiver down before the season already started. It's just not tenable. Russ is 35. It's not going to be a good time. And especially in a very competitive division. The AFC in general is so much better than the NFC. And the AFC West has bare minimum 2 teams that are it's playoffs or heads roll, right? So that's why I think Denver is still going to probably finish in last. Maybe they'll beat out the Raiders if the Raiders don't play Aiden O'Connell. But that's why I want to talk about their odds heading into the season. Their over-under is 8.5. I would hammer the under. It's not a good situation. Super Bowl's plus 4,000, pie in the sky. Don't even think about it. AFC's plus 2,500. Again, don't think about it. And AFC West winners plus 500. That is the most nonsense one. Just Russell Wilson needs to prove that he can play within a system that isn't him scrambling for 4 seconds and then finding a shifty slot receiver deep. It's just not a good way to play consistent football if the team isn't built for it, and Denver unfortunately is not built for it. A player prop to take a look at for sure is Jerry Jeudy over 87.5 87, that'd be a game prop. 875.5 receiving yards over, right? Last year could not have been worse in terms of quarterbacking, and he played with Drew Lock. He managed 972 yards despite the disaster between Nathaniel Hackett's offense and Russell Wilson being a bad quarterback now. At minus 130, that feels like stealing money. So I would take Jerry Jeudy over 87.5 yards receiving. And that's really all I have to say on the Denver Broncos. The defense will be better, and they'll be better on the margins. They won't be 5-12. They'll be 7-10. 6-11. I don't see them doing well in the AFC because even a last place schedule in the AFC means you're playing some good team somewhere. It's a very, very deep conference. Moving on to the third place team, the Las Vegas Raiders. They are an enigma of a team. They have lots of good players. They don't have a ton of bad players. They've got a lot of average to middling players. Mediocre players and some slightly below average players, but no one truly bad. And frankly, the worst player that they signed might be the biggest one name-wise in Jimmy Garoppolo. He is very confusing because when he plays, teams win, but it's never because of him. He's not a good quarterback. He fit into Kyle Shanahan's system, and he gets a lot of credit because he's the quarterback, even though Trent Williams might be the best player in all of NFL, and he's the left tackle on that team. Deebo Samuel's a monster. Brandon Ayuk's a monster. The whole offensive line in general, Kittle, they added McCaffrey, but you can plug in any running back into that system. It's all freaks, and the defense is special. He's going to be away from that environment, but he's going to be in an offensive style and system he knows with Josh McDaniels. I did like them signing Austin Hooper, Jacoby Myers, Cam Sins is a good ball player. Robert Spillane's a good linebacker. Philip Dorsett is a good ball player. They added veterans for the secondary in David Long and Marcus Epps, so that's really good. They re-signed Josh Jacobs, brought back some offensive linemen, and they just brought back Jesper Horstad, brought back Jakob Johnson, the fullback. They did trade Darren Waller, which was a weird situation, but they ended up replacing him immediately with tight end Austin Hooper and drafting Michael Mayer. They did lose Derek Carr as well to the Saints, but it's like not that big of a loss. He seems to have a ceiling on his play. So, again, not too bad, especially if Aidan O'Connell can actually develop into a good quarterback. I really like their draft. They drafted Tyree Wilson, who'll be an impact edge pass rusher immediately, and you can also play him 3 technique on the inside, and he can take advantage of the guards that are not as athletic as him, and he'll be able to stunt with Chandler Jones and Max Crosby. So it'll be a good defensive line situation for the Raiders. Michael Mayer, as I mentioned before, Notre Dame tight end. Notre Dame tight ends tend to be locks and be productive tight ends right out of school. Like, look at Kyle Rudolph, and that's the main one I'm thinking of. But good track record there. Byron Young, Alabama interior defensive line, again, should be able to contribute right away. And another one I really like, I mentioned a bunch already, is Aidan O'Connell, Purdue quarterback, who had a really, really good 2021 and a worse 2022, right? In 2021, he threw 3,712 yards, had a 71.6 completion percentage, 8.4 yards per attempt, 28 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, right? So 2022 wasn't as good, but also Purdue was not as good, and it had more to do with the roster and competition level in the Big Ten than it did, I think, himself as a player. And he takes a lot of risks as a player, and that led to turnovers and things like that. That's coachable, right? Because if they can tap into the 2021 Aidan O'Connell, the guy who was making plays down the field, who was taking what was there, playing within the system, and not really hurting play, and not just being a good college quarterback, but a good quarterback fundamentally, I think that if Jimmy gets hurt, or if he just straight up loses the job, the Raiders will be better with O'Connell because he might be able to paint by numbers a little bit more than Jimmy G will. Because Jimmy G was terrible last year, right? There's no getting around it. He was not good, and then he got hurt. It's his MO. So if Aidan O'Connell plays, I think the Raiders will have a better season than people can expect, mostly just because he's got a good offensive line, right? And they ran the ball a ton, and they were really good at it. They ran the offensive line averaged 4.93 line yards per rush, which is exceptional. It means Josh Jacobs wasn't getting touched until around 5 yards most of the time. And they ran it up the middle, attacking where defenses tend to vacate now. With most teams playing a cover 2 shell and then using nickel as a base, the middle of the field just isn't as big. And they attacked that deficiency in the defense by running up the gut, using their offensive linemen, Dylan Parham, Andre James, Alex Bars, guard, center, guard, maulers. Really, really good. And the blindside blocker's awesome. Colton Miller, who is really, really good now. The Raiders were 6% in sack rate. 5.9% of the time was the sack rate they allowed, which is really, really good. And Colton Miller is the anchor of that pass protection. And that's part of it. He's a really, really good offensive lineman, protects the quarterback well, does well in run blocking. Just quietly one of the best left tackles in the game right now. And I think he's going to just keep being steady. That's what he needs to do. And Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers and Hunter Renfrow are going to be in the same receiving core. That's really, really good. And now they have Michael Mayer, Josh Jacobs. They've got team, but McDaniels is not a good head coach, or at least he hasn't proven he can be. Who knows? Maybe he is. Maybe this is the year he finally has a winning season where they don't cheat, like they did in Denver that one time. But, man, the offense can be special, and I hope it is, because that group of linemen and skill players is really, really fun. And I think the defense just has to be better, right? There's no way it's it really can't be much worse than it has been the past few years. And I think Marcus Epps and David Long being added to the secondary is really big because the veteran from the Eagles and a veteran from the Rams, those are two teams that have played competent defense before, and younger players can ask them like, hey, when, like, even if the coaches, like, just, they can be a coach on the field along with the coaches themselves, and young players will have some people to look to make sure that they're in the right spot, they're aligned correctly, and just little things like that. And when you have a secondary that's decent, it doesn't have to be good. It just needs to be better than awful, right? If they can leave the bottom fourth of the league and the pass rush can continue to be awesome, and it's been a one-man show with Max Crosby. All Chandler Jones has to be his average. Tyree Wilson and Byron Jones have to be contributors. And Max Crosby is going to be even better. He's already been phenomenal. Last year, 15 sack, 81 pressure. Unreal. He couldn't be better. He can be better if the team around him is better. And I think it will be because, like I said, Chandler Jones is on the team. Tyree Wilson just got drafted. Byron Jones should be good. The Raiders have a chance to have a good season. I think they will finish third. I think they have a better roster than the Broncos. I don't think they have a better coach than the Broncos, but I think that their quarterback situation is slightly better. I think that their offensive roster is much better. I think the defense can probably be average. But honestly, for the over or under, which is set at 7.5, if Aiden O'Connell is the starter most of the season, give me the over. But if it's Jimmy G, you want the under, and that's sort of like a live bet too, right? If O'Connell's starting at any point, take the over, like live over if it's available. And for a player prop, Max Crosby over 11 and 3/4 sacks is plus 115. That's theft. That's stealing money. Just because I don't see a year where he regresses that hard, barring injury. All of this is with injury not on the table. We're assuming that every football player is in their best position possible to succeed. So yeah, that's what I think of the Raiders. I think that they can be good. I like their players a lot more than I like the Broncos players, but they're not getting much love in the media because they don't have sexy names like Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, and it's not as a Kardashian-y, reality show-y, so that's why. Moving on, I'm going to call them the San Diego Chargers at some point, so I'm going to get that out of the way. The Los Angeles Chargers, 2022, 10-7. Oh, this is something I'll go back and mention. The Raiders with their efficiency numbers. I should have done it at the beginning, but I'm doing it now. It is what it is. We're rolling with it. They were 6-11, 8-9 against the spread. That's good for betting. Obviously, 8-9 is all right. That's what every gambler ends up finishing anyways. Scoring offense, 12th. Really good. Decent. DVOA, they were 17th. They were not as efficient as they could be. That is harmed by the Jarrett Stidham games, obviously. They can put up points. They can score, and they can be efficient. That's been proven. Scoring defense, 26th. The efficiency-wise, they were worse. They were 31st. Again, that's why I think that they can get better, right? You can regress to the mean in all aspects of football, right? So I think that they can be better, especially with the Robert Spillane, David Long, Marcus Epps especially. So I think that'll be a better number this year. Special team scoring-wise was 24th. It's a little, again, that's just the amount of field goals they kicked. DVOA, they were 12th. They were really solid in the return game and in, return game all aspects, right? Punt returns, kick returns, defending them, returning them, just solid. 12th is really good. So now that I got those efficiency numbers, like I said, I think they can be better than they were last year. The roster's really good. It's just a matter of quarterback play. And sometimes you just need a QB that can paint by numbers for a little bit, and you can have an efficient offense. And I think that the Raiders can do that. Like I said, Super Bowl odds is plus 4,000. Not good. AFC champion plus 2,800. Not good. AFC West winner plus 1,400. Not good. Don't take any of those. Take the Max Crosby player prop and take over at plus 120 if you can. If you think it's a good bet. If you don't think I'm too crazy. Going to move on to the Chargers. I'll get the efficiency stuff out of the way earlier and their overall record and things like that. So in 2022, they were 10-7, 11-6-1 against the spread. Scoring offense, 13th. DVOA, they were 19th. Scoring defense, 22nd. DVOA, 16th. Special teams, 9th. DVOA, 6th. So special teams were really good. And that is a coaching thing. So they have a solid staff. That's for sure. Scoring the 9th most, being that good in the return game is good, obviously. Scoring offense was down, and I want to talk about that a lot because it makes me mad. It makes me mad. The Chargers should not have ever, with Justin Herbert as your quarterback, you should never be that low in scoring, especially efficiency as well. Scoring defense, 22nd. It's about right. Their key players get injured too much, and Brandon Staley doesn't really adapt his scheme to account for injured players. It's a very stars and scrubs sort of scheme. So, getting into it, in free agency, they were very inactive. They added Eric Kendricks, former Vikings linebacker. They re-signed Morgan Fox, the interior defensive lineman. They re-signed their right tackle, Trey Pipkins, tight end Donald Parham, Cameron Dicker, the kicker, and Easton Stick, Foster Sorrell, just depth pieces. They did lose Drew Tranquil, but Eric Kendricks and Drew Tranquil are the Spider-Man pointing at each other meme, so not really losing too much there. In the draft, they drafted Quentin Johnson out of TCU, awesome player, good pick. Helps in sneaky aging and oft-injured receiving core. Second round, they added Tui Peloto, USC edge player. Again, they need just bodies on defense, and that's why I like the fact that they picked Tui. They picked Dayon Henley as a off-ball linebacker. Again, they just attacked what they needed in the first 3 rounds, and I think that'll do well for them. UDFAs are mostly useful for looking at running backs, and I think that the most interesting running back to look at is Tyler Huseman out of North Dakota. North Dakota is a really good FCS team, so I think that can continue going forward for a running back, because, again, running backs can come from anywhere. They just can. And looking at their props, over under 9.5, Super Bowl plus 2,500, AFC champion plus 1,300, AFC West winner plus 300. So I want to preface everything I'm going to say that this is the Chargers. Any sort of preview you write, anything that can be predicted about the Chargers, whether they are in San Diego or Los Angeles, has been the same for like 40 years. The Chargers have played entertaining football with a gunslinger quarterback with a variety of weapons at their disposal for 40 years. That dates all the way back to the Air Coryell offense with Dan Fouts at quarterback, tossing it to Kellen Winslow Sr. Then you can go to Drew Brees, to Phillip Rivers, now Justin Herbert. And it feels the same every single year. They have an underperforming defense and an offense that feels like should be better always because of how talented the quarterback is. And I don't know if 2023 can be different, but there is something about 2023 that will be different for sure. Potentially it's because health is random, and maybe they have a good health year. Maybe Keenan Allen, Joey Bosa, J.C. Jackson, Jalen Guyton, Donald Parham, Rashawn Slater, Mike Williams all play the majority of their games instead of missing the majority of their games, right? Those are all Pro Bowl to All-Pro caliber players, especially Slater and Bosa. So definitely we're missing them last year. And then that's the health of their defense, mostly with Bosa, J.C. Jackson, right? And Rashawn Slater's an All-Pro tackle, right? They're very good. The next is their usage, right? And I will preface this with saying Justin Herbert was dinged up at the start of the season. Last year, early in the season, he had a rib injury, played with it all season, right? If he was injured enough to only check the ball down, he should not have been playing. He just shouldn't have, right? And Joe Lombardi, their offensive coordinator, had a quarterback who can flick their wrist and drop a 60-yard dime he turned him into a check down machine. It's not a smart way to run an offense. It's very frustrating to watch. He only targeted wide receivers 38% of the time. That's the lowest amount in all of the NFL, and he targeted the backfield 24% of the time. And I don't care if it's Austin Eckler. You have Justin Herbert. He should be throwing the ball down the field. He should be attacking the middle of the field in the seams where only a certain number of guys can make those throws. He's one of those guys. He needs to attack, right? That's how you win. And lowest average depth of target in the NFL. No, not lowest, but 30th. 7 yards average depth of target. It's just not... You don't win football games playing that way. It's impossible to win football games playing so scared. And when you play so scared, throwing the ball as much as they did while playing scared makes no sense. Joe Lombardi had the Chargers throwing the ball 63.8% of the time, which is absurd. They have Austin Eckler. He can run between the tackles. If he wants to get paid, he better be able to run between the tackles, right? So it was hitches and outs, and it lengthened the game. It made the defense worse. An injured defense at that. He made an injured defense at worst and neutralized the offense to any capacity, right? And I'm not one of those people that thinks, oh, passing the ball, pansy, you got to run the ball, right? Passing the ball is more efficient. You should pass more than you run to be an efficient offense, especially if you have a good quarterback. It makes no sense to not do that. However, offensive linemen need to take steps forward to be successful in pass blocking because you get tired stepping backwards every single time. And I'll talk about this when I eventually get to the AFC East. It's infuriating what these analytic, smart teams with the crazy quarterbacks do sometimes, because you do need to take steps forward. You do need to have like a classic power play or inside zone, or even just outside zone running play. It's not smart to make a quarterback throw the ball 50 times a game when they don't have to, and it just lengthens the game in a way that creates issues for your defense. Especially if you don't have a great defense like the Chargers, probably won't. They have a talented secondary, but their front's iffy. I don't like their front very much. And when you have a situation like that, you need to be able to give them a breather, and the Chargers just refuse to. And Joe Lombardi's gone. He should have been gone. He's just not a good OC. But they had Kellen Moore, who is a fantastic OC. My man turned Dak Prescott into a Pro Bowler and borderline All-Pro. Imagine what he's going to be able to do with Justin Herbert. And the Cowboys ran the ball a ton. They ran the ball creatively, efficiently, effectively. And that set up a great passing attack. So Kellen Moore is very creative. He'll be able to get the most out of a good offensive line when healthy, which is what the Chargers have. They have good weapons between Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Quentin Johnson. And Justin Herbert's a super weapon. We're going to see Herbert's best season, barring health and all that good stuff. Obviously, this is health related, right? This will be Justin Herbert's best season as a quarterback in the NFL with Kellen Moore as his offensive coordinator. No doubt. No doubt. He'll be awesome. The defense with Brandon Staley, barring health, should be good. Joey Bosa and Derwin James need to approximate what Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey did for the Rams. They won't be top 10 like they were when Staley was the defensive coordinator for the Rams, but I think they can be a top 5 offense and a top 16 defense with that combination. So I think that's what the Chargers need to do to be successful. And with the over-under at 9.5, I think they'll be 11-6 at a minimum. 10 wins absolute minimum. It's the Chargers. Nothing's guaranteed. So take it at your own risk. But minus 115, I think that this unit will, especially with Kellen Moore calling the plays now, this unit should be really, really good. It should be explosive. It should be fun. And bare minimum, like I said, I think 11 is the sort of middle ground. I think at the maximum, they can do a best offense in the NFL situation where they just outscore everybody, maybe even win the division. I wouldn't trust them with anything in the playoffs yet, just because, again, it is the Chargers. They have 40 years of bad mojo they got to work out. But regular season, I can see them being successful. That ties into the player prop. Justin Herbert at plus 650 to lead the NFL in passing yards with such an improvement at offensive play caller, I think that is on the table. Plus 650 is pretty solid odds. And, The only one that has shorter odds, I think, are Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. So decent company. You got a smart offensive coordinator. You should have a healthier offensive line, healthier wide receivers, healthier quarterback. And they won't be throwing hitches more than anybody else. The short yard, like curls, flats, everything short is going to be gone. It'll be useful in short yardage situations and everything, but it won't be the main flavor of the offense. And I think that's going to be a much better situation for the Chargers and lead them to their best regular season in a fairly long time. So again, 9.5 is too low. Take the over for sure. Player prop, Justin Herbert to lead the NFL in passing yards. That's plus 650 is really good odds. So take that for sure. And time for the big bad wolf of not just the AFC West, but the NFL in general. The Kansas City Chiefs. 14-3 last year. 8-11-1 against the spread. Is what it is. They get it done when it matters. Scoring offense, first in that. In efficiency, DVOA, first in that. Scoring defense, 16th. DVOA, 17th. Special teams scoring, 10th. They're pretty poor on special teams efficiency-wise in terms of the return game, 19th. But, again, that's fine. They're the best scoring offense in the NFL, and that's what you need to win, and you need a defense that can get a stop every now and then, and that's what they had. In the offseason, they added Jawan Taylor, the offensive lineman from the Jaguars, and Drew Tranquil from the Chargers. And their biggest addition is defensive end edge player Charles Omenihu from the 49ers. They re-signed Blake Bell, Jody Fortson, punter Tommy Townsend, Shane Buechele, who I didn't realize was still in the league, backup quarterback. And yeah, some special teamers, nothing too crazy. A departure that will help them is Frank Clark. He is not good at football. He's sneaky, just a product of Chris Jones. They did lose contributors. They did lose Orlando Brown Jr., the left tackle, to the Bengals, which is a big loss because Andrew Wiley was a very bad tackle, and he's gone as well to the Commanders, so a win and a loss there. They lost Juju Smith-Schuster to the Patriots, who is undoubtedly a good possession receiver. He's a really good big slot, decent outside receiver. They lost running back Ronald Jones to the Cowboys, is what it is. They have a really good running back room. They lost Mecole Hardman to the Jets, which, again, another good receiver gone. And then Juan Thornhill to the Browns, safety. You hate to lose a guy who's been there for as many years as Thornhill has, but is what it is. In the draft, they addressed the missing Frank Clark with someone who should be better immediately with Kansas State edge player Felix Anudike-Uzomah. He drafted a wide receiver Rashee Rice from SMU in the second round, who I think is going to be really good for them. Third round, they addressed the offensive line need with Wanya Morris out of Oklahoma. And then in the later rounds, Chamari Cooper, safety out of Virginia Tech, Steve Spagnuolo should be able to do something with them. And, rounds 5 through 7 are a bit of a crapshoot, so not really going to go over that much. Nothing too crazy in the UDFA market. They're not a big UDFA team, the Chiefs. They tend to be a draft and develop sort of thing. So I got really no one to look out for on that front. But heading into the season, they've got 11.5 over-under. I'm going to tell you right now, just bet on that. Barring an injury to Mahomes, bet on that. Super Bowl plus 600, that's stupid. That odds are that short. AFC champion plus 3,500. You might as well, because they make it to the AFC title game every year. AFC West winner minus 175. It's sure money. And preview-wise, the offense will be the offense. Until the wheels fall off of Travis Kelce or Patrick Mahomes gets hurt, or the combination of Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith all get hurt and miss the entire season, I don't think they can be bad. That interior group for the offensive line is so good. They maul in the run game. They're exceptional in the pass game. They're just a super solid unit. That tackle play can actually afford to be not the best. And even then, they'll probably get decent tackle play. That's how the Chiefs roll. They did lose Juju and Mecole Hardman, which did mention, but Sky Moore needs to improve. I think he will improve. Rashee Rice is a good plug-and-play slot receiver. And if anyone remembers Justin Ross from Clemson, who was very good, with Trevor Lawrence in 2018 and 2019 in particular. He opted out of the COVID year and had a poor 2021, and he went undrafted and was on the Chiefs practice squad last season. And in 2018 and 2019, 2018 was astounding. 14 games, 46 catches, 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. That's an average of 21.7 yards per catch. That's awesome. Then in 2019, it was 66 catches for 865 yards, 8 touchdowns. He proved he could be a deep threat and a possession receiver between 2 different seasons. 2021, only played 10 games, 46 catches, 514 yards, and no touchdowns, but he still averaged 11.2 yards per catch. Or no, he had 3 touchdowns, and he had none rushing. He had 3 touchdowns. So, and that was with DJ, I can't pronounce his last name, but it was DJ, the Clemson quarterback. You guys know who I'm talking about. Hawaiian last name. Don't have it in front of me, so I'm not going to try to pronounce it off of memory. DJU. So, with a bad quarterback and in a bad situation, coming off a year where he didn't play football, he didn't perform well, and everything I'm hearing from the Chiefs is that he's having a really good camp, and that's scary because he's legit talented. He's legit very good. And if he can find that gear again, man, that's going to be scary, and I think he'll very quickly be like the number 1 guy. A lot of people are trying to hype up Kadarius Toney. I think he's an electric gadget guy, but I don't know how much of a consistent receiver he can be. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, solid deep threat. So they've got guys with roles, like Sky Moore can be the possession, Rashee Rice can be the slot, Toney's the gadget, Marquez Valdes-Scantling is the deep threat, Travis Kelce owns the middle of the field, and Justin Ross could just sneak up and be a beast. Mahomes is speaking highly of him, so there's no reason to not really believe that, right? And then you get to the running backs, it's a really good room. Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like whatever order you want to use those guys, they have that versatility. They have different skill sets. They're good ball players. And Pacheco's obviously a weapon in the return game as well. It's a good team. It's a great offense. And they're very versatile. They can run the ball if they want. They can pass the ball if they want. They can attack you deep, kill you short, carve you up in the middle. They can do whatever they want. It's just a matter of Mahomes' health and, honestly, the opposing defense's ability to cover the middle of the field and make Mahomes scramble and being able to cover those scramble drills. The receivers are getting a little worse year over year, which is, it happens, right? It's the NFL. Guys leave. So you might be able to take advantage of that if Rashee Rice and Sky Moore and Justin Ross don't perform. So that might be the only weakness, but even if that is a weakness, what if they just decide they're going to run the ball more than they did last year and you get carved up the middle because of how good their offensive line is? It's a horrifying offensive situation. And as good as that offense is, something does scare me with the Chiefs. And this could be their fatal flaw this year. And it's their defense. And it's because Chris Jones is currently holding out. And Chris Jones does not get much attention because he plays for the Chiefs, right? That's Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and in years past Tyreek Hill getting the attention. And for some godforsaken reason, Frank Clark got more attention than he did. Frank Clark is not a good football player at all. Like, he just does nothing to contribute in the run game, gets no pressures, and he just cleans up the sacks that Chris Jones created. It's because he was a first round pick, people still think of him highly when he's just not very good. And Chris Jones has been the only reason the Chiefs defense has been average. He's that impactful. He's the second best defensive player in the league behind Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is the best player until he retires, just straight up, or he keeps missing years. But Chris Jones, from the interior defensive line, like a 3 technique lining up over the guard, had 77 pressures and 15 sacks, along with 31 stuffs in the run game. That's stupid. Like that's an obscene stat total from a defensive lineman who plays on the inside. Those are edge numbers. Those are numbers you expect from a all-pro defensive end, right? He had the same season as Max Crosby, and Max Crosby is a sicko. He's awesome. So that's the type of caliber of pass rusher you get, along with really good run defense. And that's coming from the inside, and that creates gravity for the offensive to account for, because typically in an offensive system, the center is responsible for blitz pickup, right? When you have someone from the interior who can rush that way, all of a sudden the center needs to be able to help out the guard on a pass rush, or they're forced to leave the guard on an island, right? So maybe they just send four. There's no pressure. They're able to pick and choose who they help on the inside, right? Play by play, the center does. With someone like Chris Jones, you have to double him. Like, there's no other option. You cannot leave a guard on an island with him besides maybe Zach Martin, Quentin Nelson, like Joe Tooney. Like, those are it's very, very, very short list, and even then Chris Jones probably beats those guys. So now you are forcing the defense to play 10 on 10, right? Not 10 on 10, actually. Chris Jones makes two players be accounted for, so it's 10 on 9, right? You've got 10 other defenders with flexibility to do what they want, run stunts, do things, because the offense is forced to acknowledge one player over everybody else to the point where it's distracting, to the point where he has gravity, to the point where a smart defensive coordinator like Steve Spagnuolo can scheme up something that forces bad decisions from quarterbacks. That's what Spagnuolo's great at, is scheming with a great defensive line, or in the Chiefs' case, one amazing defensive player. And he's holding out. Chris Jones is holding out. It's not viable. The defense will be terrible if he's not on the field. It's hard to say explain the impact he has, because he rarely misses time. But the best example I could mention is in 2021, before the Chiefs went on their run to prove to everyone, back to hosting the AFC title game, the Chiefs had a bad start to the season, and I remember a game, it was against the Titans. They lost 28-3 or something stupid like that, 25-3. And Chris Jones, because they had such a bad edge situation, in part because Frank Clark is that terrible, and wasn't producing off of his side, so they added Chris Jones to the edge and tried to hope that they could get production on the outside. The defense didn't hold up because Chris Jones was pretty good outside pass rusher, outside lineman. But you moved a player who is, again, when he's playing his natural position, only one player in the whole NFL is a better player than him, and it's arguably the greatest defensive player of his era. You lose the value that creates by having someone who wrecks the game from a certain position, right? It's the same sort of thing of a shutdown corner changes the math for a defense. When you have a great pass rusher, especially from the inside, because that forces a double team, an interior double team, frees up blitzers, frees up stunts, frees up backers. It transforms the defense from good to great, or even bad to average. And he's holding out, and depending on how long that holdout is, could be disastrous for the Chiefs. Because if he misses the majority of camp and he comes back during the season, he won't be in shape to play. And even if he misses only some of camp and he comes back during it, he probably won't be in shape to play for the first month of the season. And while we have seen the Chiefs come back from a bad first month, or bad first couple of weeks, or bad first 8 weeks even, I don't like the idea of your second most important player on the team not being there for training camp install, not being there just in general, because it's bad for the team. And I don't see a situation that's recoverable if he holds out long enough, right? If he's back before the first preseason game or even the second preseason game, I think they'll be okay. But if he's holding out the entire preseason and it bleeds into the regular season, the Chiefs' defense is cooked. It just doesn't have enough. The offense will put them in good positions to tee off on pass rush and all that sort of thing, but they won't have their best player. And when your best player is there's a sort of thing, right? Your best player is your best player their most important player, right? So is your best player a off-ball linebacker? In that case, they're probably not your most important player, because that's a low-impact position, right? If your third best player is a really good cornerback, or a really good edge rusher, or a really good interior defensive lineman, then that's the impact. That's where you feel it. So your second best player on the team, who's one of the best players in the whole NFL, is missing. He's also your most important player for that side of the ball. Definitely your second most important player on the team. Is missing for any point of the season, especially if they are missing important snaps in September that could bleed into October because they're not happy with their contract situation. That's a devastating spot for a team to be in when they have Super Bowl aspirations, which they do. It's Andy Reid, it's Patrick Mahomes, and beforehand it was Chris Jones. Those were like the rocks of those teams, right? Because that's what they do. They're that good. Year over year, that consistency, it lines up together. This AFC title game run aligns with Patrick Mahomes arriving, Chris Jones arriving, and both of them starting. Like, year over year. That's what transformed the team. And that, if he's gone, that half of the game's gone. And instead of... it's not all doom and gloom, right? I'm talking a lot about it, but it does matter for the important matchups against the Bills or the Bengals or the Chargers or, even the Raiders, because they can rack up points. So, I think it's Jaguars. Are you kidding me? Like, those are teams that are going to be licking their chops to be playing against that defense. Obviously, the defenses they have aren't excited to play the Chiefs, but every game is going to end up being a shootout. So, I still think that the Chiefs will win at least 12 games. It's 11.5. I do see a world where they lose 5 games in a season with the coach and quarterback they have. Not really. And instead of a singular player prop, just because all of their odds are so short, I think that the over is going to hit almost every single game they play this year, especially without Chris Jones. Every game is going to be like 28-28. Sort of range. I think that it'll be around there. And just because the offense will be that good, it always is. And the defense is going to be really bad. It's not going to be good. So, and again, it's all dependent. This could change. If Chris Jones ends up signing a contract, he could sign a contract tomorrow, right? Today. But until he signs that contract, I don't think the defense is capable of being good. So, I think, team prop, game over game, take the over, probably going to hit. And again, over or under 11.5? Are you kidding me? Minus 140, even if you're not a fan of betting a ton of money, it's minus 140. Take it. It's a good bet. So, yeah, that was my AFC West preview. And, it was a long boy. And I think all of these previews will be, around this range. Hope you enjoy listening to it. This is sort of a companion piece to the article I'm posting tomorrow, today, whatever date the 4th is. Whenever you're listening to this is evergreen content. I hope you listen to it and are able to glean something from it, at least schematically, and things like that. So please read the post. Please listen if you can. Treat it like a podcast, that sort of thing. And I do want to say this, I passed 500 page views on the blog in 3.5 weeks, and I really appreciate the readership a ton. It means a lot. And I hope people continue to read, continue to enjoy everything I'm writing, and let's make some money with Mace. Peace out, everybody.